What's your favorite scary movie? Hey there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we're continuing on with our 31 days of Halloween, and today we are looking at Scream. So Scream is a 1996 American slasher film directed by Wes Craven. Now it's written by Kevin Williamson and it stars Neve Campbell, David Arquette, Courteney Cox, Jamie Kennedy and Skeet Ulrich. Now guys, for me Scream is by far one of my favourite horror movies of all time. I absolutely love watching this movie and I've seen the movies countless times. I pretty much grew up with the Scream series, so it's by far one of my favourite, if not like my top 3 favourite slashers ever. What I love about Scream, it's basically made for a horror fan. So if you watch the movies themselves, they pretty much dissect everything you love about a slasher film, and it is kind of a joke with the audience. You're kind of in on the joke, you get a lot of the humour if you're a fan of horror. But guys, we are going to go through all of my positives with this movie. Spoiler alert, there are no negatives. Honestly guys, if you haven't seen the Scream series, get watching it. There's a new movie coming out soon called Scream 5, and we'll have the return of the original cast once again. But guys, my first positive with the movie is actually the opening scene. Now the movie opens up with Drew Barrymore, who at the time was kind of billed as the big star of the movie. She was on all of the posters front and centre, so going into the film itself, audiences were led to believe that she would be the final girl. Instead, she opens up the movie and gets killed within the first 15 minutes. But what I love about that opening scene is just how different it is than other slashers before it. With Ghostface, he's a really interesting killer because he's a lot more dialogue with the victims. As well as that, he generally calls them and kind of plays with his victims before he takes them out. He kind of talks about horror movies, which as a horror fan is just something really fun to see on screen. What's great about the movie as well is you do kind of get to play around with that. So while you're watching it, Ghostface in the opening scene is asking Casey Becker all these different questions about her favourite horror movie or who killed who in certain horrors. And as an audience member, as a horror fan, you get to play along with that too and guess the answers. Now that opening scene though, again guys, as I said, it kind of gives a throwback to something like Psycho, where you're led to believe one thing and suddenly it goes left field. And that's what makes the movie fun. It is different than other slasher movies, although it is kind of picking apart the slasher genre. The killers are actually quite unique and different than what we'd expect. So with Scream we have Ghostface, and generally what's great about Ghostface is he's a different killer in every Scream movie. So in the original Scream, of course, you know, he is a human killer. He's not a supernatural killer who's going to constantly come back and just won't die. Instead, what's great about him, he's actually played by 2 different characters. So Ghostface is not just one person. It's a really fun twist on the genre, and what's great is these killers are fans of horror movies. So it does go through many different rules that had been there for the last decade in slashers, and at the same time it completely annihilates them and creates brand new rules. But they do this in a really subtle, interesting way. So we have our final girl Sydney, who generally up until that point with slasher movies, if a final girl had sex or did drugs or drank alcohol, she would generally die in a movie. With Scream, they completely turned that on its head, and because of that we get probably the best final girl of all time, Sidney Prescott. With Sidney Prescott, you know, she is a fighter through and through throughout the entire movie, but as well as that, what's interesting is her story harkens back to Ghostface. So something happened to her mother a year before, her mother got murdered, and that actually is linked to the events that are happening in with the movie. She already kind of has this trauma, she's been through this horrible ordeal, and now she's going into another one. Again guys, with slasher movies you generally have your final girl who kind of has to go through this whole ritual of being scared, of being attacked, before finally fighting back against the killer. What's great about Sydney is right out of the gate, she is not that type of final girl. You know, she hates horror movies, she thinks they're stupid. She always is kind of giving out about a stupid girl running up the stairs instead of going out the front door. It's just a different type of final girl that knows about horror movies and knows how to actually outsmart the killer. The rest of the cast as well, what I love about this movie is we have a cast of characters that we relate to and we care about. Again guys, if you're a horror fan, you're going to relate to most of the characters in this. They are not just there for a body count. With slashers before this, a lot of characters are there just to be killed off in really fun, creative ways, whereas this one you are invested in the characters because you really want to know as much as you can about them to figure out if they are the killer. So with the characters, when their death scenes come, you are kind of ticking things off bit by bit, trying to figure out who's actually left to be the killer. It's a bit of a whodunit, and a slasher movie all wrapped into one. The movie also doesn't just primarily focus on teenagers. So we have characters like Gale Weathers and Dewey who are kind of on the sidelines, and it just kind of makes the town and the entire story feel much bigger. So there's a lot of different things going on. There's a lot of different chess pieces around the area. This movie also kind of changed the direction of horror movies by introducing some more comedic elements. Now Kevin Williamson's script is really witty, it's really sharp, and all of that really does translate on screen. As I said, we have characters that know about horror movies, that know how to outsmart a killer, and that just makes it a lot more fun. It isn't just pure downright terror. Even when certain people get killed in the movie, there's generally a joke thrown in there as well, and it does kind of lighten the mood. So you get these great kind of moments where you get this action-packed scene full of scares, full of suspense, and then you get a joke afterwards. And it's just an interesting way to bring the audience back down again. It kind of makes it feel more like a roller coaster. You were going up on these highs where you're getting genuine frights and scares, and then you get to laugh about it afterwards. The movie is both scary and funny, but it's also quite action-packed. The last 30 to 40 minutes of the movie is non-stop action. With Sidney Prescott in particular, she's kind of being attacked by Ghostface. You know, she's doing everything in her power to survive that situation. And what's great is it brings us to many different locations. We also have Dewey and we have Gale on the sidelines having their own story. And towards the end of the movie, all of it culminates in one big showdown. So I do enjoy that. I think again, guys, up until this point with slasher movies, we would have the main storyline that would happen, and maybe in the last 15 minutes the final girl would discover the bodies. There'd be this big showdown between the final girl and the killer, and it would end there. With this one, we do go to many different locations. There's a lot of kind of set pieces going on. There's a lot of action and there's a lot of suspense. The kills in the first Scream movie as well are actually quite iconic. There's a lot of great kills in here. We of course have the famous cat door scene, but even Stu's death scene with the TV falling on his head, there's some brilliant ones in there that are quite creative and quite gory. But overall, guys, Scream is definitely a clever, witty and scary horror movie. It has a great cast, it has a really interesting and suspenseful plot, and just overall, guys, it's a fun movie if you're a fan of horror movies. If you haven't, guys, definitely check it out this October. Now guys, as always, if you are a fan of Scream, if you're a fan of the Scream movies, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you haven't already, guys, make sure you pop on your notification bell. Make sure, guys, you subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.